Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Scottish independence. No, not the adult diapers. The real people of Scotland. They want their freedom from English rule, or at least some of them do. Offered a bloodless way toward independence, it seems some of the good people of Scotland aren't so sure they want it. Stacey.
Yes, Max, this has been a big topic here, and it appears that it's difficult to determine whether or not they're going to vote for independence, because apparently some of them only like to dress in blue and run down hills with spears. That's the sort of independence they want to win. But the other issue is George Osborne has been visiting Scotland and warning them that if you leave the Union, then you will not be able to use the pound sterling. So this is a problem because Alex Salmond with the Scottish National Party, he wants to stay in sterling. Now, Alex Salmond refuses to rule out separate currency. Alex Salmond has refused to rule out a separate Scotland adopting a new currency and faced accusations of being clueless on how a multi-billion-pound pension shortfall would be resolved.
Yeah, well, Osborne's talking out of his bottom, isn't he? Scotland's got all the oil, they've got the creative spunk, they've got it all. Scotland, 21st century. Yeah, Osborne's just fear-mongering, and nobody should listen to him anyway. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
There are many ways to run a currency, and I thought, like, if they're going to adopt a new currency, I thought Bitcoin is a great currency for them.
Sure, Scotland should adopt Bitcoin as the national currency, and it would help power that country to be a competitor in the global Forex market as Bitcoin takes over the global Forex market, the $4 trillion per day market for trading currencies. Bitcoin is making a big inroad there, but at a country like Scotland behind it, it would certainly help the cause. And Donald Trump, of course, you could then do whatever it takes to get him, that Weasley nut job, out of the country.
Well, so to go further on why Bitcoin would make a good currency for Scotland, I thought let's look at some of what people are saying around the world regarding this. Lenders may create Bitcoin rivals, says New Zealand Bank Group. Commercial banks may create digital currencies to rival Bitcoin, the virtual money whose US dollar value collapsed by 46% in 24 hours last month, the head of New Zealand's banking lobby said today. So you see the propaganda embedded in there. They're saying it dropped by 46% in that brief little flash rise and then flash crash. But here you're seeing the banks themselves are saying, well, we want to create our own one because, of course, of the efficiency of transmitting in a very genuine globalized currency. Why not leapfrog ahead of everybody else, Scotland, by having this genuine globalized currency where you can make transactions globally, instantly, no Forex exchange, no 3-day wait, instantly, and with complete trust that it's a genuine transaction, a genuine cash, the Bitcoin cash you're being handed.
Bitcoin is a virgin currency that will remain forever virginal. The Bank of England's pound sterling is an old hag that will remain always and forever a worthless, fiat, nonsensical trollop. And they're not going to compete with Bitcoin. These banks will not compete. They will not introduce anything near a Bitcoin. Just like there was only one Joan of Arc, there was only one Virgin Mary, there was only one Allah. There can be only one Bitcoin, and it rules supreme.
Everybody's now trying to get in on this. PayPal is also saying, we want a cut of the action, though we don't understand what Bitcoin is trying to address, what problem they're fixing. Of course, they're fixing the problem of transmitting currencies in a globalized world where you need to have faith in, somebody in Peru that their $5 item that they're going to send you is real, and they want to know that it's real, that they've received the money. So I wanted to turn to, staying on New Zealand, this top news show there, One News. It has a market share of 44%. Here's the propaganda. They were talking about Bitcoin, and here's some bozo expert, allegedly.
This Bitcoin business, one of the things about it is that it's free of politics. It's free of any sense of obligation to society, indeed any connection with society. It's indeed, it's been described as being, we know about Facebook being a social networking system, as an anti-social networking system. It's highly individualistic. And the concern is, in part, that while it's pretty sinister, drug dealing or money laundering or whatever, there's also this inclination towards a highly individualistic society in which we can operate anonymously. Nothing is traceable. We avoid paying taxes. We avoid exchange rates. We avoid a lot of the things that binds us together as a society.
Well, you know, again, I hate to play the I invented the virtual specialist card again on this show, but U.S. patent number 5950176, the virtual specialist technology from 1996, is a precursor to this exchange problem as it relates to virtual currencies, as it relates to Bitcoin, and that idiot is talking And the fact is that the cryptological element to a virtual currency, you put them together and you create a world-beating currency, just like BitTorrent destroyed the intellectual property business or forced it to reinvent itself. Bitcoin will force the global banking system to reinvent itself or die. JP Morgan will no longer be able to simply go out there and steal with the accomplices of the big four accounting firms, the fund managers, and the Justice Department. They'll have to actually compete for a living. And that's what we can look forward to with Bitcoin.
Well, exactly, because then the woman goes on to say that, yes, she agrees that it's a sinister currency, and that currencies should be controlled instead by governments and big banks. And he had said that the society is binded together by paying exchange rates. So there you see, it's a rentier economy. They know that we have a rentier thing where these guys, this 1% control everything. You have to pay the toll booths over and over and over. And I wanted to turn to a headline out of America regarding this to show you exactly what a rentier economy is and why they want it. New York Times, 7 of top 20 highest paid CEOs were media moguls. New research published by the New York Times show media moguls are disproportionately represented in the ranks of the country's highest paid executives. When ranked by market worth, the top 20 companies in the United States do not include any media firms. Yet media corporations employ 7 out of the top 20 highest paid chief executives. Leading the industry was CBS head Leslie Moons, who made more than $60 million last year as the 3rd highest paid executive in the country.
Right, that's based entirely on copyright. And the copyright extension law, the so-called Mickey Mouse law, every time Mickey Mouse is set to enter the public domain, they expand copyright by another 20 years. It's why Aaron Swartz, by the way, Chris Dodd felt it need to pressure him to the point where he killed himself. Chris Dodd of the Motion Picture Association of America, who's the lobbying group in Washington for the copyright cartel. And yes, it will result in, as you call it, rentier profits. The intellectual property comes from the public domain. It should, by law, re-enter the public domain in a reasonable time. That Thomas Jefferson thought during the founding of the America and the Constitution, 14 years. Not lifetime plus 75 years. That's perpetual copyright. That's giving society a collective lobotomy. And these guys are copyright cartelists who are destroying the economy.
Well, of course, everybody in America knows of Scotland based on the film Braveheart, which again is like part of this copyright rentier economy, living off the intellectual property of Scotland. People are already living off the oil resources of Scotland. They're also living off the intellectual property of Scotland. And by the way, we need a new Enlightenment. And all of the Enlightenment, much of the ideas of the Enlightenment come from Scotland, whether it's Adam Smith or David Hume. The ideas of the Enlightenment come from there. So for a knowledge economy, it seems like they should have more power on a globalized scale using a Bitcoin globalized currency and their knowledge ideas.
What could be more of an invisible hand than a cryptologically guarded invisible currency like Bitcoin? I agree with you. It is like the Enlightenment or the Renaissance. It is a moment in history that we will look back on as being a total change in the course of human history because it reinvents this entire idea of money, which has been an issue for thousands of years. And Scotland, my brothers in Scotland, the Maxwell clan, of which I am a member of, it's Maxwell Keiser is my full name. The Caverloch Castle is my former abode, going back 1,000 years. And the family crest is Reverusco. We will rise again, and we will take over Scotland again. I am your king. And I pronounce that Bitcoin is the currency of the new realm of Scottish independence. And we are going to Edinburgh, and we are taking back what's rightfully ours.
Finally, on Scotland and rentier economies, of course, You know, they had 90% of North Sea oil reserves are in Scottish territorial waters. That's apparently brought in up to about £300 billion over the last 20, 30 years to the British Treasury. Now, of course, they want to go independent. There's not much left. 75% of the oil reserves are blown through. But Alex Salmond provokes row by predicting £57 billion Scotland oil boom. First Minister accused of selecting optimistic economic forecast to bolster his case for independence. So assuming it had a full geographic share of North Sea oil and gas production based on international marine treaties, Scotland's total reserves would be the highest of any EU country at 60% of total EU oil reserves.
George Osborne and the new guy at Bank of England, Mark Carney, they are engaged in massive money printing. They've been able to hold back the floodgates of inflation, even though the real shopping cart inflation in this country, in Britain, is now almost 9%. It's not the 2.8% that the government lies about. But when that bursts and you see inflation 20, 25, 30%, oil goes to $100, $200, $300 a barrel. So what is remaining of Scottish oil will give it so much wealth, it could come down here like the Icelandic people did during the boom of the Icelandic economy. They bought the West Ham Football Club. They bought Hamleys or Hanleys, a toy store. They bought all this stuff on the high street. Scotland will come down here. They'll buy Buckingham Palace. They'll buy Westminster. They'll buy Oxford Street. They'll buy it all because they've got all the oil and it's $500 a barrel. All right, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, stay tuned for the second half. I'll be speaking with Frankie Boyle. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to turn to comedian and Glaswegian Frankie Boyle. Frankie, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thanks for having me, Max.
All right, Frankie Boyle, George Osborne has been up in Scotland warning against independence. What the heck is the story with Scottish independence anyway, and what are your thoughts on it?
George Osborne, man, every time I hear his voice, I just feel like I should gather my belongings and get off the land. Just like he's going to come and seize my sheep or something.
He has a face like he's perpetually caught in a state of panic. He doesn't instill a lot of confidence, does he? He's
just a chancer, isn't he? He's just like maybe his PR is like a time-travelling sheriff of Nottingham or something. Because clearly someone is telling him, could you not sneer in public? And he can't quite bring himself to do that. But
he's like warning Scotland, though. He's saying, you know, don't go independent. You'll die. You'll fall into the ocean. You won't get the British pound. He's really warning them, like, oh, how you'll never survive. I mean, the Scottish people, wouldn't they take that umbrage at this and say, you know, to hell with you, Osborne?
Scottish people don't care if it's a British pound, providing it's heavy enough to throw at a referee. They just couldn't care less. I think it's scaremongering, isn't it? I mean, there's lots of things with Scottish independence, and you think the case hasn't really been put properly yet. But if you look at our maritime border with England, that's quite interesting. England owns oil fields that are north of Dundee. It's basically a huge zigzag line heading towards like Norway or somewhere. So there's lots of ways that Scotland could survive economically, but obviously his job is just to beat the drum for fearmongering.
Yeah, sure. They've got the oil, and the oil is really the secret, quote-unquote, behind Margaret Thatcher. Without the North Sea oil, there would not have been the Thatcher Revolution as we know it. Thatcher, of course, Tory. Your thoughts in terms of Scotland's independence, you could get away from the Tories.
Well, that's a huge selling point of it. I think if they could put it to people like that Scotland could be the independent socialist country that it feels it is in its heart. If they got away, that would be a huge selling point for them. But they haven't really chosen to put that case there, because obviously the people at the heart of the independence campaign and the SNP and so on aren't socialists.
Yeah, I mean, even in America, the people in Alaska get a cut of the oil revenues. The people in the Middle East get a cut of the oil revenues. If Scotland were independent, all the Glaswegians and everyone in Scotland would get a cut of the oil revenues. It would be a socialist paradise.
It would be a socialist paradise. But you know, you got sort of. You got George Osborne there, haven't you? I don't know why Osborne denied taking cocaine, right? So clearly he's never taken cocaine, as he says. But I mean, if he had, it would explain his personality. If he was constantly on coke, just the sheer horror of his personal bearing. He should just go for it. He should say he should snorts it every day with the deeds to Hertfordshire or whatever he does.
Well, he has the habit of a cocaine user or an ex-cocaine user where they're always looking for that bindle. You know, where do they put that bindle? What pocket is it in? You notice you see that in the City of London a lot. Bankers kind of checking where they put their coke.
Right.
Yeah, even when they're not doing the coke. Now, the Scottish banks, very famous, RBS and HBOS, epic financial fraud zones. But they're now owned by British taxpayers. Isn't this a good time as any to leave English with the bad banks? You see what I'm saying? Like another benefit of going independent is just leave all the Scottish debt in England and you walk away without that debt.
Yeah, because actually the reason Scotland joined with England was because of debt in the first place. Do you know that? The Darien Project and all that stuff?
No, tell us.
Well, the Darien Project was basically Scotland thought they would get in on colonialism, and they decided that they would have a colonial empire out by Panama, and they invested a lot of money in that, the nobles at the time, and they lost all their money because everybody died from yellow fever, and that's why they had to do the Act of Union with England. And the spy in Scotland who was seeing just how broke the nobles were and if they would go for this was Defoe, who wrote Robinson Crusoe. He was an English spy.
Right.
So we're founded on debt. The whole union's founded on debt.
And a lot of this debt was built up during those Thatcher years, even though they had a lot of North Sea oil behind them. It's not like Norway, where they built up this huge, almost $1 trillion worth of a reserve fund for the country. They just blew it all here on housing speculation. Osborne's got a new project now where he's going to mimic the subprime disaster of America. He's going to bring that to the UK now, where the government's going to subsidize speculation in the housing area. It's clearly a Ponzi scheme. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole thing, if there'd been a shortage of affordable housing and them saying, well, we're going to bring back a right-to-buy scheme that caused the shortage of affordable housing, and what was Cameron's thing, so that everybody can share the dreams of homeowners? Is that the dreams of eating tissue paper to survive, or the dreams of being trapped in a loveless marriage by negative equity? It doesn't really say. But yeah, it seems like a huge Ponzi scheme.
Is it psychosis, or are they just stupid?
They're not in charge. I think that's the thing.
Who's in charge?
Banks. I think the finance sector is in charge, you know? And if you look at our politicians, do they look like they could be in charge of something? Like, we're beside Boris Johnson's office here. Does he look like he could lead? He couldn't lead you into a revolving door. He's a bouncy castle with Alzheimer's. He's not exercising power over anybody. It's a sham. They're the front of a three-card Monte.
Let's talk about the media in this country, which of course that means the BBC, because the BBC is the media in this country. Yeah. And you've had your run into the BBC.
Sure.
I'm not sure if you've
been everybody.
Have you been banned currently, or you're not banned, or are banned, or?
I think I'm effectively banned.
You're in the penalty box.
Yeah.
For the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was on the 10 o'clock news. The 10 o'clock live show a couple of years ago, talking about I was saying hang the bankers.
Yeah.
And one of the Lovies comics, David Mitchell, was aghast that anyone would make the suggestion. And there was a huge brouhaha, and they were really trying to defend the bankers, even though the Goldman Sachs banker at the table said, well, yeah, maybe we should hang the bankers. Why are comedians who would be, you would think, on the cutting edge of satire and really pointing the finger where it needs to be pointed, so reticent about attacking the bankers, yourself excluded, of course?
Well, I think it's the ones that are, I mean, David Mitchell was brilliant, but there's a certain thing of the people who are allowed on television becomes a narrower spectrum during times of crisis. So comedians talk about this. They say in times of austerity, you'll find that like happier comedians do better. You know, Michael McIntyre, people like that, because people want to forget about stuff, and that's true. But also, more challenging people start to go out at the edges. They start to not appear on TV because you need a really stupid population. You can't rip people off like this with people who have any information. So you don't just need a stupid population. You need you need people, 50 million people a week watching a dancing dog. I mean, that's what you need. People just, you know, if you're going to get away with this.
Is that a nice way to talk about Sir Forsyth?
Is he still alive when this goes out? When do you go out? Friday?
Freddy's he's a dancing dog, a dancing poodle to distract the population. Is that a nice thing to say, Frankie?
That would be a lot better.
Now, you have a visitor in Scotland, of course. Donald Trump has shown up with a golf course.
Yeah,
he's a nice American, low-key American.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I mean, that just shows you how unprogressive the SNP are, that they called back his horrible golf course. And of course, it creates jobs for people in Scotland, jobs creating, you know, whatever, off businessmen and changing their sheets.
Yeah. Let's get back to the media discussion for a second. So you're saying, Frankie, that the comics who are looking to really go after these bankers are going off the mainstream channels, off the major markets. They're appearing more. I mean, I go to, for example, in London, there are now a couple of showcases. One's called Lolitics, which is in Camden once a month, which is mostly political comedy. And of course, that comedy goes in cycles. You're one of the top talents in the UK, in the world, I would say. Give me your insight into this. You know, we went through the 60s where you had a lot of political comedy and political-oriented music. Then we went through the Reagan era, which was pop and Madonna. Are we getting back? And then we had the punk rock phase. Not a lot of punk comedians, although maybe in this country there were. Where are we historically on the culture cycle? Frankie Boyle, your thoughts?
Well, you're in a point where it's been held down into what it would probably come back up into a cycle of rebellion again, is kind of been held down because they need people to be saying as little as possible at the minute because of all the various massive frauds that are going on. So you can't really have people talking about that. I mean, even when I started out doing panel shows, we were talking about the Iraq War during the invasion of Iraq. You can't imagine that now. You can't imagine that a panel show would be on that and they weren't leading on, you know, sports.
So it's getting worse at the moment?
Well, it's getting worse, but you've got to remember there's the literal meaning of things and there's like the doctrinal meaning of things. And this thing Chomsky talks about a lot, where he says, so like political comedy literally to us means, you know, Bill Hicks, George Carlin, people talking about politics. But doctrinally, political comedy means satire in Britain. It means people having a bit of a go at the coalition, saying that there shouldn't really be cuts, not talking about things like war or Gaza or any huge kind of political touchstones. You know, so there's a doctrinal don't talk about that. That's accepted by most people if you want to get on a TV. Or
yeah, because there's a stranglehold in media with the BBC. So how come there's so little media diversity? In the print page, there's different print, you know, left-oriented print newspapers, somewhat compared to the U.S. But a lot of people here would say that doesn't exist. That the Guardian is just very, you know, just a little bit less to the right than, let's say, the Telegraph. But compared to the U.S., there is kind of this left wing. But on TV, however, it's all right wing. There's no left at all on TV because it's all dominated by the BBC. And I was just reading a documentary about BBC. In fact, hides taxes through the Netherlands, just like Starbucks and Google and all these other companies. So they're just a corporate slime bucket as well. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got a situation really where if you look at certain things being reported by the BBC, so if you look at something like Israel-Palestine or something, you can see a great deal of what would seem to be institutional bias there. And it's a great institution in some other ways. I mean, compared to television in America, I think it offers a lot more than you can get in any commercial channel in America. But at the same time, you've got to recognise the role it plays in Britain in propaganda. You know?
Well, when we were doing a show for BBC World News called The Article with Max Keiser a couple of years ago, we only had one editorial direction, and that is we could not mention Israel in any context.
Right, sure.
That's the only thing we heard from the BBC.
Well, I mean, you've got to remember though that it's kind of like a warring federation in there, you know, and there are people who would want to do that joke about Israel, and some of them might be working on your show, but what they're vulnerable to is kind of lobbying about, and they're very vulnerable to the press. I mean, you've got to understand the role of the printed press here in that. What they're scared of is, if you think about the Jonathan Ross, Russell Brand scandal a few years ago.
Yeah, tell the people in here, this is the phone answering machine.
Yeah, this is a huge scandal in Britain where it was about nothing, essentially. It was about, on a radio show, two really famous people here did a prank call to a kind of well-loved actor and said some stuff they shouldn't have done. But that is still a bigger scandal than the current paedophilia scandal in the BBC. It's still,
the Jimmy Savile scandal.
Yeah, if you were to look at column inches, I bet it's still a bigger scandal.
Right, so Russell Brand left a message on a phone answering machine where he made fun of a guy and used a very spicy language. Yeah. That became a huge scandal, and BBC was censored, and it was covered. But the Jimmy Savile scandal, where he's involved in over, I think, 400 cases of child pedophilia, this kind of is swept under the rug.
Sure, I mean, and that's what they're scared of. If you're talking about why they're scared editorially, they're scared of newspapers that can come out every day with big guns and they could just put you on the front page every day until, you know, your Director General has to resign. That's what they're really scared of. There's a lot of good people in there, you know.
Well, this Thatcher funeral, of course, virtual state funeral.
It was a state funeral, yeah.
And she was, I believe, gave Jimmy Savile a knighthood.
Yeah, what was going on there? We don't know. They should have, like, a fitting funeral for her would have been to just plug her orifices, leave her in the sun for a few days, pull out her arse cork and let her go whizzing down Westminster like a deflating balloon. Like, people couldn't have been less interested.
There was a big ad for Starbucks.
Yeah,
because of course she's all about market forces.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it would have been beautiful.
Should have loved it.
On pay-per-view, could have been profitable.
Yeah.
It should have been a profit on the funeral. They shouldn't have had a loss on the funeral. Margaret Thatcher's rolling in her grave because they took a loss on her funeral. They could have made a killing on that funeral.
Her political guest list at the funeral was just a damning indictment of the shambles that was the IRA. They should have got all of those guys.
Well, I often make that allusion myself. And my director usually, I'm glad somebody mentioned
Osborne
this.
was crying at the funeral, wasn't he? It was like a thing from Star Trek or something. He just like couldn't believe it. It was like a tear forming in the burning eye of Sauron.
All these shots of Michael Portillo. You know.
Yeah, it was.
What's that all about?
It was bizarre, wasn't it? And to think that they went so large on it in such a time of supposed austerity, you know, it's disgusting.
All right, well, we're way out over time, but Frankie Boyle, thanks so much for being
thanks for
on the
having me,
Keiser Report.
Cheers, man.
All
Thanks.
right. Okay, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Frankie Boyle. If you'd like to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.